Today I'd like to talk about a term that you're probably already familiar with, which is chiaroscuro. It's an Italian word. Chiaro means light, and scuro means dark, like obscure. And the tradition goes back a long ways. So basically, it employs the use of strong contrasts, right? It generally appears as though the forms are coming out of a deep well of darkness. And the whole composition is affected by this. So the way this is employed is it's utilizing contrast and modeling as a means to create volumes that are believable in that space. So you already know a lot of artists, and if you see my notes there, which you can, who already deal with chiaroscuro, Rembrandt, Caravaggio, Vermeer, Goya. Here we've got Hans Holbein the Younger drawing Christ at Rest. And you'll notice that the dark, even though he's not coming out of a black space, the forms are rendered in such a way where there's such a high contrast, it's almost like a two-tone. And so that creates a kind of mood. So you will see this throughout the whole of art, starting around the late Renaissance. Sometimes they are hard-edged, and sometimes they are soft-edged. But generally, it developed in a sort of spectrum, right? So it came out of the tradition of what's called Tenebrism. And Tenebrism is from the Italian tenebroso, means just dark, gloomy, and mysterious. Occasionally, it can be called dramatic illumination, basically kind of like a spotlight, right? If there's an especially big focus on chiaroscuro, you'll see where darkness is oftentimes playing off of your psychological desire to see what, that which is hidden, right? The light informs you as to how to read the image itself. So there was a big trend in the Baroque era, which directly followed the Renaissance, to utilize a kind of candlelight to create a sense of narrative and to hide a sort of emotive response of the peripheral subjects, such as in this one, right? The matchmaker. So we've got this sort of moody atmosphere that is meant to sort of elicit a magical feeling. And the light tells you who is important and why to look at them. This was a thing that was employed often. So we can move well past the Baroque era into 1766 and still see this sort of spotlit effect that sort of is reminiscent of just the single candle. We can see this influenced in film as well. The best known one, and really if you look for it in any period film, it's pretty easy to identify. But Barry Lyndon, which was done in 1975 by Stanley Kubrick. And you all know Stanley Kubrick from The Shining. And so what this light does is chiaroscuro can essentially affect you in a way that pushes a sort of dynamism between two characters. It can push the narrative along. It can create a sense of mood and atmosphere. And tension. And ultimately, storytelling is about tension. The dynamic between figures and the dynamic in the space between them that can sometimes be a very pregnant tone, right? It's filled with a lot. You can also see this in the movie that Alfred Hitchcock wrote and directed called Psycho. Any of you ever see Psycho? Right. Oftentimes, films like this are misattributed to what's called film noir. Alfred Hitchcock played with film noir, but He wasn't strictly a film noir artist or director or writer. But this attention and focus on a singular light source really does give you a myopic version of the storyline. One of the best known Tenebrists is Georges de la Tour. And Georges de la Tour really did define the space that was lit by a single flame. And obviously this can be evocative of a foreboding sense of death as she's holding a skull. Magdalene with the smoking flame. Obviously it's Mary Magdalene. It's evocative of the death of Jesus. A pensive moment. The Supper at Emmaus, done by Caravaggio, right after the Renaissance, so the beginnings of the Baroque era, 1601. This exists in London. I've seen it. It's amazing. So it was paid for by a cardinal, by brother of a cardinal, Girolamo Mattei. And why it's important is this is the moment that Christ reveals himself in the presence of the pilgrims. And the pilgrims go a walking, they see a stranger, he doesn't know what's going on, what's up, they invite him along, why don't you join us for supper? And so at supper, he reveals himself in vision to be Jesus Christ. And why is this a Tenebrist image? Well, let's talk about the tension that is created. We have an extreme foreshortening created by the old man in the lower right-hand corner with his hand reaching out to the audience, to the viewer. And the hand draws you in. It's a moment of exclamation where he says, aha, I see you for who you are. The light, however, is a confusing light source. We see not only a light source from above, you see that the hat on the head of the guy in the upper right-hand corner is lit from the top, and his forehead is as well. So we have a light source from the top, which suggests studio space. Because the studio in Caravaggio's world has lighting from one area, and that is a very, very distinctive single source window, natural light. We then have light that is confusing us, which seems to emanate from the lower right-hand corner, which creates the cast shadow, splashing the shadow of Christ up against the wall, right? And there's going to be a lot of foreboding in any image of Christ around this era. Catholic imagery would have suggested a number of things through both the still life and the lighting to forebode the imminent execution of Christ. One of which, in this image, is the still life that is just about to fall off the table. Do you see it? Whenever you have that happening, that is a sort of, a moment of tension that is created to suggest the fall, right? Not the fall of man, but the fall of the body. We have a man who is not facing us, who is about to get out of his chair, also sort of in a moment of disbelief. And we see this little tear on his arm. See that tiny little tear on his arm? These little notations are not there arbitrarily. They are actually very, very contrived. That is meant to be a suggestion of the stab wound that Jesus got after he was executed, where the water and the blood came out from his lungs from the stabbing of the Roman soldier. And so you'll see these little elements both in still life and in the surfaces of things, especially in Caravaggio, that are called visual puns. Visual puns. They're meant to be evocative of a narrative that we already deeply know. Caravaggio was especially influential. He basically created, through influence, a school called the Caravaggisti, where many, many artists followed suit in working in his methods. Artemisia Genoleski was one of those artists. Yes, a woman. She worked under her father, Orazio Genoleski, who was very, very well known. In most of, her paintings, she signed Orazio, her father. And now art historians are trying to decipher whose work is who, and it's become a sort of feat. And what we have here is Judas slaying Holofernes. And if you know, Holofernes was, I think, like a Syrian general. Essentially, he invaded a Jewish colony, and Judith used her feminine wiles to sort of seduce him, sneak into his tent, get him drunk, and chop his head off with the aid of her maidservant. And so she liberated her entire people. It's one of, a great, sort of feminist story in the Bible. It's a very violent image, however, and it's been done again and again and again. And if you don't know the background of Artemisia Genoleski, you should Google her. When she was like 17 years old, one of the apprentices or one of the artist friends of her father raped her behind closed doors. And when she pointed the finger, a woman's word did not hold up on the stand. It needed to be substantiated by either like something like 3 other women or another man. And so her father went to trial with her, and it was dismissed. But the entire event basically, made her unreputable and tarnished her reputation to such a degree that she, had a hard time finding employment as a painter. It really ruined her, even though in all probability it was true. And so she created a lot of these paintings that were very violent about women sort of getting vengeance in the biblical world. Again and again, she painted this image. So here we have a close-up of what that might look like. See the two-tone? Very, very quintessentially chiaroscuro. And then the spray of blood. Very violent. Another Artemisia Gentileschi, a Lucretia image. Martyred saint. Another Artemisia Gentileschi. Self-portrait as St. Catherine of Alexandria. One of my favorite paintings is by Bartolomeo Manfredi, Mars Chastising Cupid. It's in, I believe, the Art Institute of Chicago, which is where I first saw it. It's a sort of dichotomous story about the triumph of sacred love over carnal love. And so what we have is a man who is emblematic of Christian love beating Cupid, who is emblematic of a kind of Greek love that is sensual, devoted to impulse, not based on the Trinity in its core foundation. I love this painting not because of the message. I don't care which way about the message, but I love the sort of dynamism of this composition. The fact that the center of this composition isn't occupied by anything, but yet it is moving in a spiral. Both of the woman who is trying to hold back the lashing, but also the body in a diagonal with buttocks exposed, about to receive that lashing. Two Youths with Grapes by different artists, Caracciolo. Judith with the head of Holofernes in triumph with her maidservant behind her. It was also a movement in Germany as well. Highly influential Caravaggio sort of just didn't have any boundaries in terms of this sense of time, space, and light. And we see it again and again and again throughout Northern Europe as well. Jan Janssens. More Georges Delatour. He didn't only paint single candle lit spaces. There is a certain tonality to the paintings that he did without that, though. The Fortune Teller. He really played with toying with the theater of conversations. We see a boy getting sort of pickpocketed here by a fortune teller's helper. So lots of, seedy goings-on of the dark underbelly of the world, which, of course, if you know anything about Caravaggio, the man who started the movement, he really was a sort of sinister character. He committed 2 murders in his lifetime. One was over a tennis match. He brazenly carried a sword when they were made illegal to carry openly. He was widely attributed by art historians to probably be a pimp when he was in Rome. It wasn't necessarily a reputable character, but he was employed entirely by the Catholic Church to make images for the Catholic Church. And then, of course, one of my all-time favorites, Velasquez. Velasquez was a teenager when he painted this. It's simply an old woman frying eggs. They are all generally humble and sort of, lower middle class or lower class imagery, even though he was a court painter to fill up the, 5th, 6th, can't remember. So he painted this right after his apprenticeship. And what often he focuses on is often very simple means and a lot in an exchange, a lot in just a simple glance or a look. And of course he was Spanish, and going on in Spain at the same time during the Baroque era was Francisco de Zurbarán. Zurbarán's also one of my favorites, truly Tenebrist. He painted a lot of highly Catholic, really intrinsically Catholic images, ardently religious. Orazio Gentileschi, that is the father of Artemisia Gentileschi, that's an example of his work there. I believe it's a little trimmed, it's a little cut off, but truly beautiful image of a woman playing a violin. So what does this play on? This plays on something you already know, but it hasn't really been drilled into you. In life, as you look around the world you are sitting in, there is very, very, very little true white and very, very little true black. Look around the room you're sitting in. So when you draw or when you paint, you want to make sure that you are consistently thinking about this, because what this slide actually showcases is the very, very limited instances where you will see true black and true white. By observing this rule, this extreme in light and dark, we can accomplish great things. We can create a kind of mood that engages the viewer in a much more emotive experience. So here we have 2 student examples of a pear and then a still life. And then a still life of some antlers, I believe, or I don't know, maybe wood that's been washed up. So to end, I think it's important to really think about actively working an entire surface. More often than not, drawing is thought about as a supplemental activity to painting. It is not. When you attack a surface and you deeply engage with activating the entirety of a drawing, you can create a truly psychological space. So you should really realize that as a potential in and as you grow.